Hey everybody, before I get started, I want to take just a quick moment to talk to you about Into the AM. Into the AM is a clothing company that produces graphic t-shirts like the one I am wearing now, as well as many other clothing items. The Into the AM website has great options for men and women of all sizes, including tees, joggers, hoodies, and more, and right now they're running a bundle deal. 3 basic tees for $49.95 or 3 graphic tees for $60. And if you want to save even more money, make sure you use the link in the description of this video to make sure you get 10% off everything in their store. These shirts fit great and feel even better, so go there now to intotheam.com. So in this video, what I want to do is share with you a few of my table rules or table expectations. These are items that you ideally would share with your players at the session 0 or maybe whenever a new player joins your group in order to lay out what is expected of you as the GM, what's expected of the players, and sort of just to make sure everything runs smoothly when you play the game, because everybody comes into these sort of role-playing environments often with their own ideas of what they want to get out of the games, and if there is conflict down the road, a lot of times that inter-party conflict or player to GM conflict can often be avoided if you are just upfront with laying out your expectations for the game early on. Now, I will say that the group of players that I have right now, I'm very, very fortunate. I've had the same core group of players at my table for about a decade now. And so I don't often have to have these conversations. By this point, we all kind of know how things work and we all gel. But what I want to do is share with you 10 of the items that I would share in a session 0, or that every now and then, especially when we have a new player join the group, are things I like to highlight. But getting us started with our first of the 10 table expectations is know your character. It is each player's responsibility to know how their character works mechanically. Um, I've got enough going on as the GM. I'm managing enough things that I don't always take the time to learn all the mechanics of every character in their class as well. So the onus of knowing how a character works and the mechanics of that character is placed squarely on the shoulders of the player. So at the beginning of a campaign, especially the new players, I'm very loose on this. I expect there to be some conversation at the beginning about how things work and what the rules are, but on session 8, I shouldn't have to be explaining again how you heighten cantrips. That's something that if you're a spellcaster, is your responsibility to know how that works for your character. And so, number 1 on my table expectations, you are responsible for knowing your character and knowing the mechanics of how your character works. Number 2 is the saying, steal for the party and not from the party. I've been playing these role-playing games since I was 9 years old. I started in 1984, and over the decades that I've been involved in this hobby, I can pretty much trace every major character or inter-party conflict back to a person who's playing a rogue or a thief, and they just think it's going to be hilarious to pick the other player's pockets, or to demand that everybody leaves the room while they pick open the lock on the chest so that they get to get first dibs on whatever's in it, or any other chicanery that comes out of these thieves and rogues. So there is a saying, and I certainly did not create it, but it's one I subscribe to, which is steal for the party and not from the party. And that's my expectation. If you're going to play a character, whether you're a thief or a rogue or whatever your class is, but if you are a person who in your backstory thinks, well, maybe this person is a pickpocket, or they're riding the edge of what would be considered decent and lawful in a society, that's okay. But just be smart enough to know not to do those things to your fellow party members. If you want to play a thievish rogue, that's awesome. But play one who knows that you don't want to be picking the pockets and stealing from the people who are keeping you alive in all of these adventuring conflicts and encounters you face. So that's number two. Steal for the party, not from the party. The third expectation is to be heroic. The games I play are very similar to most of the published adventures, and there's an expectation that the players are the cinematic good guys. And as the cinematic good guys, there's an expectation that they're going to want to engage with the story in a way that is heroic and cinematic. Um, this has not often been a problem for me, but I'm putting on the list because I've got a friend who has a lot of difficulty in her group where she'll set up a storyline that might include going to a village and the villagers say that there's a plague and the plague's caused by a witch who lives in the woods, right? And as the GM, her expectation is the players are going to say, oh, we should investigate this. We should look into this. We should try to help these poor villagers. But instead, her players often say, well, kind of sucks to be you, dude. See ya. That doesn't impact us at all. And they just want to avoid engaging in the stories that she creates. And a large part of that is because they're not following the expectation that they're supposed to be cinematic, heroic figures in that game. Now, this is an area that might be worth mentioning a little bit about player agency. My point here is not to force someone to play a character that they don't want to, or to force a player to make their character make decisions that they wouldn't naturally do, but there needs to be an expectation that we want the party as a whole to engage in the storyline, and the storyline is probably going to call for them to be heroic, and just set that expectation up front. Number four is don't just make a backstory, but play your backstory. And what I mean by this is sometimes we'll get together for a session zero, we'll have some sort of activity where people create their character's story and their backstory before we even get into selecting classes and rolling dice and putting numbers on paper. And that's always a fun activity, but sometimes we'll get like 5, 6 or so sessions in the game, and a player will say, uh, Dave, we've been playing for a while. Why haven't you done anything that represents my backstory? Just a quick example. Say a character creates their backstory that says they are members of a thieves guild, or they were a member of a thieves guild, and they stole something important from that thieves guild, and now they're on the run from the other members of that thieves guild. And so there is the expectation that as they're adventuring in this Pathfinder game, that maybe that will come back to haunt them. Maybe members of that thief guild will track them down and attack them in the middle of the night or do something. And if that's the backstory that they create, and you go a number of sessions into the game and nothing happens that interacts with that story, sometimes they get mad, or they feel like creating their backstory was wasted. And I'll be the first person to say, absolutely, as the GM, I control the NPCs, so it's on my shoulders to do things like have the rogues try to track them down and set a trap for them, or so on and so forth. But I do not believe that that is all 100% on my shoulders. So when I say don't just create a backstory, but play your backstory, what I'm asking is that if that player creates a backstory of a thief who's on the run from their thieves guild after they stole something from them, that they play their character like they're on the lam, that they make decisions within the narrative that reflect that. If they're going into a new town, they might be weary about going into a tavern for fear that maybe this is a local hangout of the guild that they're on the run from. Or, they may ask a member of their team to go investigate first for them, or they may just do other things that weave this in. If you're on the lam, you're going to be doing things. You're going to be disguising yourself. You're going to be hiding. You're going to be avoiding contact with people or a class of people that might lead back to that guild. If we've been playing for a number of sessions and I haven't done anything to introduce or interact with that backstory, I would want the players to ask themselves if they've been doing anything that interacts with that backstory as well. If I've got a player who every session they are very particular about uh, having their backstory influence their decisions in a creative and realistic way, then that encourages me to do things to engage in their backstory. So that's number four. Don't just create a backstory, play your backstory. And the fifth is roll with my mistakes. I am not a perfect GM, far from it. I will fumble the rules from time to time. There will be occasions where I completely forget a video I made just 3 weeks before and completely mess up a ruling. All I ask when I do make a mistake like that at the table, that we don't bring the entire game to a screeching halt and get into a debate over the rules and how things should work and so on and so forth. Instead, what I ask my players to do, unless this is a major consequence, unless if this is something that's the difference between a player's death and them surviving, that's a different story. But if it's just me messing up a modifier here or there, I just ask that they wait until the end of the session and just reach out to me afterwards and say, hey Dave, you made a ruling here on this situation. I think it probably should have gone this way. And that's a great way for me to learn from my mistakes in a constructive manner. What I don't want is for the game to come to a stop. I am very much in favor of momentum at the game table. I want to keep things moving forward. I don't want to have to stop and pull out books and get into a rules lawyer debate. So that's number five. Roll with my mistakes. Don't interrupt the game. Don't stop the game. Reach out to me afterwards, and I'll take care of it. Number six is be respectful of everyone's time. The groups that I am GMing with right now, a lot of the people in those groups, well, all of the people in the groups, 100% are adults, and we all have jobs, we all have responsibilities. The majority of the people in these games are parents with kids, so I completely understand that there are other obligations that people have that are going to get in the way of being able to make it to a game on time or to make it to the game at all. But I do ask that in those situations, you let me know. And you let me know at least a day or two in advance. Because I'm doing prep. I'm trying to get things ready for a fun evening with all of my friends. And if a player can't make it, that's might call for me to change a few things. But if three players can't make it, that might call for us having to cancel. And we want to figure that out ahead of time and not on the day of the session. So, real simple comment number six, be respectful of everybody's time. If you're not going to be able to make a session or you're going to be late, you let me know as soon as possible. Number seven is a big one with me. This has not been a problem in a long time, but it is something that just still kind of gnaws at me. And so, number seven is you are not the protagonist. And this is something that happened commonly in my younger days. I think as people got older and matured, maybe not so much. But you are not the protagonist. There is a sense amongst some players that they want the story to revolve around them. They want to be the center of attention. They want to be number one billing, the star of the show. And I got news for you. There's 4 or 5 other players sitting at this table. You're no better than they are. You're no more important than they are. Everybody will have a spot in the limelight. If you go to a Sky Citadel, the Dwarven player is probably going to get a little more attention than the other players. But once you leave the Sky Citadel, it's going to be somebody else's turn to get a little bit of time they get their 15 minutes of fame within the story. No one player should expect that they are going to be the center of attention for the entire storyline. Number 8 is what I like to call you're not always going to be the biggest dog in the junkyard. In other words, I don't want to hear about encounter balance. There's just going to be some times within the narrative where you might be put into a situation where if you decide to engage in combat, you're going to be on the losing side. Or it's very likely you're going to be on the losing side. Uh, many stories, books, movies, you often see early on the heroes encounter the major villain, and the major villain wipes the floor with them. And that's just setting up the drama and the problem in Act One that in the final act they're going to deal with and conquer once have the abilities to do so. Um, I don't believe in this notion that every encounter should be balanced. Like every fight should be a fair fight. I don't believe that at all. There should be times within the narrative where you probably should be smart enough not to pick a fight with a certain person or look at other options. I'm not looking to kill players. I'm not trying to get TPKs. I'm not trying to put people in areas that they are guaranteed to lose. I'm trying to manage a narrative. And sometimes in that narrative, you're not going to be the most powerful person in the room. You're not going to be able to pick a fight with everybody you want. And you're not going to be able to win, or you're not going to be able to solve every problem through violence either. Uh, this is something that in recent years I think became an issue. Really, from fourth edition on, there seems to be a lot of people talking about encounter balance and well, that wasn't even a fair fight. Well, it wasn't supposed to be. You know, it's a dragon, dude. Like you know, your third level is a dragon. You probably should have either tried to negotiate or run. You know, there's other options than pulling out your battle axe. So yes. So uh, you're not always going to be the biggest dog in the junkyard. Number 9 is associated with the previous one I was just sharing, and that is be accountable for your actions. And what I mean by that is I do not run games where the expectation is the heroes are always going to win by virtue of them being labeled the heroes, or that everything is going to go their way. Uh, I have a few players who play in other games with other GMs, and it's a very loose environment. And it's very much a you can do any wacky, silly, goofy thing you want to do, um, and the consequences will be wacky and silly as well. And that is fantastic for them and that GM in their game, but my games are a little more rooted than that. And so if you want to do something that has negative consequences in the game, you have to be willing to accept that. If during a game you make a decision to take a certain action that may not be well advised, and the outcome of that action is a consequence that is narratively appropriate, that is not in your favor, you have to be willing to be okay with that and accept that I'm not trying to ruin anybody's fun in the game, but it's just a logical progression within a story that if you do A, B is going to happen, and B may not be exactly what you want. That's just the part of being in one of my games. There are actual consequences to decisions that players make instead of just always doing whatever you want without fear of consequences. And my last table expectation for this video is that players resolve their issues with words, not dice. And what I mean by that is, regardless of what system we're playing, whether it's Pathfinder 2nd Edition or any other system, I think Pathfinder 2nd Edition actually has some of this baked into the rules, but players never roll dice to see if they successfully lie to another player, if they successfully bluff another player, if they successfully intimidate another player. None of that. If there is player conflict at the table, or not player conflict, forgive me, if there is character conflict at the table, those characters, or the players of those characters, have to resolve the situation through role play, through their words. I'm not going to have dice determine whether or not a character believes something or if they feel intimidated by one of their fellow players or something like that. I feel like that just eats too much into player agency. So whenever there is inter-character, inter-party conflict, the players need to settle their disagreement through words and not dice. So there you have it, 10 table expectations. If you have any table expectations or table rules of your own, please leave those in the comments. This is always a great way to share your thoughts and successes with other GMs. If you have any questions about any of the table expectations I shared, please leave those in the comments as well. And if you have any suggestions for future topics for me to cover on these videos, let me know in the comments as well. And I also want to take a quick moment to say thank you to everybody out there who supports me, whether that's by leaving your suggestions, your comments, buying a t-shirt or two from Into the AM, supporting my sponsors, clicking the like button, subscribing to the channel, subscribing to the Patreon. I really appreciate everything you folks do to support me. And with that, thanks for watching, take care, and happy gaming.